There are hundreds types of assets in Unreal, so how do you make them and how do they work? Where are all my files from my project? And what does the Curious Engine directory contains? Spoilers ahead, some fun Unreal Engine stuff, so watch this video to learn about asset types in Unreal. And most of the stuff is gonna work in UEFN. Did you know that new empty level is so empty that there is nothing, not even freaking light? It's like a black hole that sucks all the light. Wait, there is no light to begin with. How do I fix this? Very simply, subscribe to my channel, because the next video is gonna cover this thing. This is beginner's tutorial series to Unreal Engine and UEFN. In previous video, we explored how basics of Unreal works, how to edit stuff on a level, how to add a couple of meshes into the level, and basics of navigation with our actors. And now we are going to look a little bit deeper into different type of assets, which you are going to be working all the time in Unreal and also in UEFN. So open your content drawer by hitting the Control Space or with this button into the lower left corner of the viewport. If you want to prevent content drawer from hiding, hit the Dock in Layout button, and new content browser gonna be created at the bottom of the viewport, and it's gonna stay open. And now right click in a content browser to open context menu for creating new assets. And you can see we have a couple of things in here. So firstly, in the get content category, we have import to game, and here you can import new assets from the disk. But let's just close this for now. I want to show you a couple of different things from in here. Right click again in the content browser, you have add feature or content packed, and this is what you saw before. You can add in here content packs or templates that Epic already prepared for you. The third option is add quick content. We're gonna skip this for now because I want to focus on the assets and different type of assets firstly. And the next is folder, and this is just basically a new folder that you can name however you want. And let's call this, for example, my assets. And this is a new empty folder. You can double click the folder to enter this folder. And to the left, you're gonna see a tree view of your project content directories. And let's just focus on this for now. This tree view that you're gonna see, it is basically all the folders and directories of a content contained in your project. And you can freely browse this by expanding the folders and clicking on each in one and see what is inside, what kind of assets do they contain. And remember that every new folder or asset is going to be created in the folder that you are currently in when you click in content browser, or you can create new assets or folders directly in this tree view by right clicking on the folder and hitting the new folder or add import content. And you can also freely move those folders around. Just drag and drop this to the place wherever you would like to. So drag it to the content if it isn't done there, and the pop-up gonna show you can copy the folder. There is also an option for advanced copy, but we won't gonna cover it for now. And you can of course just basically move the folder and all its contents to a new place. So just move it to the content folder. And now let's click right again in the content browser somewhere in the empty space and go through the basic assets and different asset types. So as you can see, there are many assets in Unreal, but for now we're gonna focus on those four. So you see a level, which is second one. You already know what it is. It is basically a map, right? So the map that we were editing in the previous tutorial, as you can see, have the same icon as this third-person map level that you see next to the Unreal logo in the main window of the Unreal. So this is a level, and we're gonna create the new level in content folder. So click this and just give it the name. Let's call this my new level. And as you can see, new level asset was created, and asterisk on the asset thumbnail shows that actually this asset is not saved. Whatever you have created or modified some kind of asset in Unreal, it enters this modified state. And until you're gonna save the asset, it is not going to be saved. And if you're gonna close the Unreal, firstly, Unreal gonna ask you to save the asset that you have created, because he's worried that you're gonna lose your work. Because if you weren't gonna save the asset and you're gonna choose don't save and close the Unreal, every change that you've done from last point of saving is gonna be gone. You have to save your asset, of course, just like in every single program. So this is not like in Creative where stuff just basically gets saved automatically, although there is autosave option and it is running by default. So that's a little bit of a savior, but get used to saving assets often, especially when you want to confirm changes, you're happy with the changes that you've made, to get used to the saving shortcut. To save modified asset, simply right click on the asset and choose save, or select the asset and use the shortcut Ctrl S. You can also save all modified assets by hitting the Save All button in the content drawer, or with the shortcut Ctrl Shift S, and this also gonna save your opened modified level because it is an asset in your content browser, remember? So we're gonna go back to this later, but let's close this save content window because we don't want to exit Unreal, and a new level was created. So let's double click this level. It is going to ask you again to save this asset, so let's just save it, and as you can see, we have new level. And surprise, surprise, completely new level usually is actually quite empty. When you create a new level, it is completely completely pitch black empty. There is basically nothing here. You can confirm this in Outliner. There's basically just the level, which is basically a container for things. So let's just go back a little bit. Let me briefly talk about how the assets are actually made and what are they made of. To understand how the assets really work, we're gonna have to look a little bit deeper into what are objects in Unreal. So the object is a building block of every single asset in Unreal. So every asset type is built on top of some kind of object. And now object, by having different components in derived classes, and class is a programming term, or let's call this a child. So objects, by having different components in childs or having different properties and functionality in those childs, can represent a different type of asset. So again, asset is basically some type of object that is very specific for its purpose. It have different components and or different properties, or different functionality basically. To quickly show you some list of assets possible in Unreal, go into the content browser, click the filter menu button, and look at how many filters you can have in here for assets that you can actually browse in content browser. There's many of them. You can think of assets in Unreal as perhaps a file extensions in operating system. So there are many different types. Everyone serve a specific job, like let's say displaying an image like .png or .jpeg file extension, or having some functionality like .exe file running some program, right? So just like Unreal, it's some kind of specific program, but its extension is .exe, so some kind of running program. So here in Unreal, in content browser, you can create completely new blank assets of specific type. You can simply do so by right-clicking and choosing asset type you want to create from the list. And some have very physical representation, like let's say static mesh that you already know, which is in short a 3D mesh model created in some modeling program like Blender. It is static because it doesn't contain deforming animation. So basically it is non-animated 3D model. And some assets are more of like logical nature, storing some kind of information. So for example, a table with data table. Going back to analogy of file types in Windows operating system, this will be just simple an Excel file. So a table containing some information in rows and columns, right? And often you do not have to create blank assets from scratch. Unreal can generate things for you. For example, if you import some 3D model into Unreal, for example, bought on Unreal Marketplace or created this model in 3D modeling software like Blender, upon importing this 3D asset, 3D model into Unreal, Unreal is smart enough to create for you the correct asset type with the data imported from that file. So he is going to create this asset for you, right? But now we will focus on few most important asset type because there is many of them. So let's just, pick the ones that you're going to encounter the most and are going to be definitely working in UEFN. So manually browsing for specific asset types is very tiresome, right? If we like to now browse our whole project for, let's say, static meshes, which are 3D models, that will be very tiresome to go through every single folder and whatnot. And to the rescue comes filtering. So in content browser, you're gonna see these 3 dashed lines and the arrow. So this is a button that brings the filters panel. And in here, you can see many different filters for every single possible asset type. And this is also gonna show you how many asset types there are that you can actually encounter in Unreal. Going from the top, let's just keep the custom filters because this is a little bit more advanced, but you have something called common assets. So let's click this. And in here, you have a couple of different filters being turned on, which are going to be filtering all the content that you're going to find in a highlighted folder for those specific assets. So to browse every single asset in your project, go to folder or folder content, because it, as you can see, contains all the subfolders containing assets in your project. And now you can see how many assets already we have in here, right? There's hundreds of assets, 285 items from those filters, right? So let's go through those filters to the left and see what kind of asset types there are. Let's skip for now Blueprint class and C++ class because they are a little bit more logic-like, and we're gonna focus on those who have more of a physical representation in the world. So turn off all the filters and leave the texture. So the texture, as you can imagine, is just basically a 2D image that represents some kind of visual data. And this is just a typical texture that you can find on a 3D model, which you're gonna import or create in, let's say, Photoshop or Substance Painter, or it can actually be some kind of image that you're gonna use in UI. This is basically a .png or JPEG image that you would import into Unreal. So you don't really create this in Unreal, although there are some techniques that you can just generate textures in Unreal. So now double click click any texture in this folder and we're gonna look at the texture editor. So most assets in Unreal have some custom editor for this given specific asset, and this window that you opened right now by double clicking the texture, open the texture editor, which allows you to do some basic operations on the texture, view its properties and whatnot. So to the right, you're gonna see in the details panel, it have also its own details panel, basic information about this texture. So there is imported size. This texture that I've opened is 2K by 2K, 2048 by 2048 pixels, and some other informations and properties that you can change. Let's close the texture editor window. So let's move on to the static mesh. Just turn off the texture filter and turn on the static mesh filter. And you know what static mesh already is. It is just basically a 3D model that was imported into Unreal, and it is static because it doesn't contain deformable bone structure that would, deform the mesh and drive the animations. And let's pick up something very simple. There is this first floor underscore 400 by 400, and let's drag it into the world. And you may be surprised that everything turned black and you don't really see your mesh except the outlines. This is because go back into the outliner and look. Remember, this is empty level. There is nothing here, not even light. Look into top left corner where those view modes are. This third button which says lit, select unlit or press Alt 3 and suddenly you're gonna see unlit version of this mesh. So just as I said, in lit mode, you see the world being illuminated by light, but there are no lights in here, so you won't gonna see anything. But in unlit mode, we see the mesh only being textured and its material, but without the light. So you're gonna open static mesh editor for this actor, and you can do so by right clicking the actor either in the outliner or just in the level and going edit floor or hitting Ctrl E. As I said, this asset also have some kind of custom editor. And in here you have some properties and options that you can do, or some kind of functionality that you can perform on this asset using this editor. Well, we yet won't gonna change anything, but we're gonna go back to the content drawer and find this asset, and you can do so from any open asset editor by selecting the editor window and hitting Ctrl B shortcut. Suddenly you're gonna see that the asset was selected in the content drawer. You can do exact thing from the level, so select this actor on a level and hit Ctrl B, and the content drawer gonna pop up with the actor being selected. Remember those two shortcuts, Ctrl B for finding the asset in the content drawer and Ctrl E for quickly opening asset editor, because you're going to use them all the time. So you notice we drag and dropped the static mesh asset into the level, and it suddenly just pop up in the level, right? It is present in the level. But go back into the texture filtering and find any texture and try to drag it onto the level, and you're gonna see something strange. There is actually this icon that says, you cannot. And this is another way to distinguish different type of assets. Some assets are being able to be dragged into the level and some are not. And so those assets who are capable of doing so are going to be transformed into the actor. Look, turn off texture filtering, select again static mesh filtering and just hover the static mesh, and next to the name you're gonna see static mesh, and this says that this is a static mesh type asset. But if you're gonna select the actor on a level, this floor that you've dropped into the level, and you're gonna go into the details panel and gonna hover over this floor, you're gonna see that it class says static mesh actor and parent class says actor, right? So it got converted from static mesh into static mesh actor, and it basically wrapped a static mesh component with static mesh actor type. So you see it is an actor which contains components, and this is referring to this first video that I've shown you. What are actors made of? They are made of components. They contain components. As I said, there are two types of assets: the ones that you can drag into the level and that are going to be automatically converted into actors, and those who are not capable of doing so, like textures. And remember from the previous video, only actors are being capable of being present on the level, and since texture is not being able to be converted into the actor, you won't gonna have just the texture in the level. The reasoning here is actually very simple. Well, in 3D you have to have some kind of mesh if you want to display some kind of texture. We're gonna go into the UVs and texturing and how materials work later on, but now just please remember that there's two types of assets: those that you can drag into the level and they are going to become actors automatically upon dropping into the level, and those who are completely not capable of doing so or require some kind of different approach or have to be dropped on some kind of object and used in the pipeline in some kind of different way. Now go back into the content drawer, turn off texture filtering, and turn on skeletal mesh. So skeletal mesh, as name suggests, it is mesh that have some kind of skeleton. So going back to static mesh, it is mesh that isn't capable of being deformed, but the skeletal mesh is. And the skeleton actually deforms the mesh. It contains some kind of bone structure, and those bones drive the way the mesh is being deformed. So we can open any of those skeletal meshes that you're gonna find in here. Let's say the first one, SK Mannequin, and this is actually old mannequin from UV4. And this asset type skeletal mesh component have yet another different editor. As you can see, we have much more options in here. We have a 3D viewport of the mesh. On the left, we have some different properties of the mesh. And on the right side, as you can see, we have few buttons that you can click. And let's go through every single one very briefly. So the skeletal meshes are composed of skeleton. And you're gonna see on the left hand side, there is the bone structure, tree view of a bone structure defining the skeleton. We cannot really see the bones right now, but go into the buttons in the viewport. Next to the show button, there is the character. Click it, go into the bones, and click all hierarchy, and suddenly you're gonna see you can use the alt and left mouse button to rotate around this mesh and the skeleton. You're gonna see this skeletal structure. It looked like this as a preview in Unreal. There are some kind of bones for hands and some kind of bones for hips and whatnot for legs. So yeah, this is a skeleton that drives the 3D animation of a mesh. So the second button, skeletal mesh, so the mesh that is going to be deformed. And the third one, as you can see, it is animation. So because it is animated mesh, animated skeleton, it also comes with animations. And the last one, it is actually a physical asset, and we won't gonna go too much into this, but this is what allows if the physics will be turned on and not the bones are going to be controlling the skeletal animation to drive the animation of the physical asset of this mesh. So let's say when you have ragdoll turned on, right, and the ragdolls are being driven by physics instead of skeletal mesh, or there is some kind of in between, but we won't gonna go too deep into this thing. What you have to remember is that skeletal meshes are basically meshes that are being able to be deformed, and you can also of course drag them into the level because they have mesh representation, and just hold and drag one and drop into the floor, and suddenly you're gonna see we have this beautiful skeletal mesh on our level. It is not animating. We're gonna show you later on how to make it animated, but let's just move on for now. Close the skeletal mesh editor, and back in content drawer, turn off skeletal mesh filtering. Now turn on Niagara system. And the problem is we don't really have any Niagara system here, but let's make one really quickly. So right click in the content browser, and from the create basic assets, the fourth one is going to be Niagara system. Click it and quickly just select the first option, new system from selected emitters, click next, and choose the second one that you're gonna see from engine provided category. It is confetti burst. This is kind of a fun one. So let's click this, click the green button at the position emitters to add, and click then finish. And now click anywhere or just rename the system if you want to, because Niagara is the particle editor system for Unreal. And double click this, and we're gonna open yet another custom editor for this asset for Niagara systems. And as you can see, when you're gonna zoom in a little bit into this viewport, you're gonna see that the animation is playing and the confetti is bursting from time to time. And you can see very complicated editor, which is actually quite complicated, but is very powerful, allowing you to make very custom and amazing VFX and particles. Basically, this is what will you use to make custom particles. You would create a new particle and just edit its properties via this editor. We weren't gonna do so just yet. This was just to show you the editor. We're gonna close this Niagara system editor and go back to the content drawer and drag this asset into the level, this Niagara system. As you can see, it did get turned into the actor. Look into the actor details, and again, it is Niagara actor, so it was turned into the actor, which contains Niagara component. Another thing is that the assets from content drawer are turned into the components, because actors, again, as I said, are made from components, and assets are turned into the components when the asset is becoming actor on the level. And if you don't see this particle being playing on the level, it is actually a burst type particle, which means it doesn't loop. Quickly just select the actor, and under the Niagara utilities in all category in the details panel, you can click reset, and it says reset the selected particle system, and you're gonna see that it actually does burst. So particles from the Niagara, that was fun. Go back into the content drawer, turn off Niagara system filtering, and now turn on material. To illustrate how they work, just choose some material that you're gonna like. Let's say m_metal_rust, drag and drop it on our floor. So you assigned a material to static mesh. So you're gonna quickly understand that materials are used to describe how different objects are going to be looking, for example, static meshes. So we can select our floor, and in the details panel under the material category, and in general, you're gonna see that we have m_metal_rust in a slot called element 0. So double click this material icon, and suddenly you're gonna see that we have some kind of new editor, and this is materials editor. Wow, it is quite complicated, but I'm gonna quickly explain you what you're looking at. So of course you have a viewport, so this is your preview onto how material is going to be looking, and we can see that we have beautiful sphere with the rust material being applied to it, and what you see in the middle is material nodes editor. So this is basically blueprint editor specifically made for materials, which helps you to define the properties and how the material is going to be actually working. So you can use the textures, drag and drop them in here into the material. They're actually being used in here in this node called texture sample when you're gonna zoom in a little bit. But basically what material are doing and the material editor is doing is defining how material behaves when it's going to be applied to some kind of object. And it doesn't have to be static mesh. There are different kind of materials for, let's say, UI and different objects that are actually found in Unreal. But as I said, again, materials is just basically a way to define how certain objects is going to be looking. So let's close the material editor and go into another filter, which is of course our level. And we know what our levels are basically a maps that you drop actors into and modify the actors and the look of the level. So we won't gonna spend too much time on them. Let's turn off the filtering and now turn on C++ class and blueprint class. And I hope now more things are going to be coming clear as we're going to create a completely new blueprint and explain what it really does. So right click in the content browser, and from create basic asset, we are left with the blueprint class because we explained the 3 other ones, and click the blueprint class. And now pick parent class window did pop up. So what are blueprints? Up to this point, we know that every single asset is based on an object. And there are different type of assets per different type of functionality or properties of this object. So for example, static mesh asset can contain information about mesh, vertices, and some custom editor just to edit these properties, right? And in the same way, blueprint asset is an asset that can be based on any type of object. So for example, object itself, or it can be based on an actor or actor component, as you can see, or scene component, pawn, character, any type of object, and will contain additionally visual scripting editor which can drive the logic. So this is essentially it. Blueprint assets allow you to create custom objects which are going to have some kind of logic code which is going to make stuff happen in a game. So for example, if you like to make a logic where door opens when you're gonna press some kind of button, it is going to be happen in blueprint scripting or in C++ code, but we are talking about objects in the editor, okay? So we're not going deep into how C++ works in Unreal. We are focusing only on the editor and the classes that you can see in the editor. And editor, if you want to drive some kind of custom logic, some kind of custom code that is going to do something, anything actually that you can imagine, you're gonna use visual scripting called blueprints in Unreal, which can be edited via blueprints editor, which is provided by blueprint asset. And so now, having this knowledge, let's actually pick up a class for our blueprint finally. Let it be an actor. So click on an actor and name it an actor blueprint. And now you're gonna quickly see that we have new asset called actor blueprint of type blueprint class. Double click this and you're gonna see in the right top corner, just under the X button, you're gonna see parent class actor. So again, we chose the parent class for this blueprint asset, which is an actor. On the left side, in the components panel, you're gonna see very important information is that, this is an actual blueprint of parent class actor. So the same thing that you saw on the right hand side, and actors come with default scene root component. So as I said, actors are made of some kind of components. So this actor is also already coming with some kind of component, and this component is his root. And root is like the basic component that every actor has. They have to have a root and have to be of type scene, because this is what defines that they are being able in the placed in a scene. Actually, the scene component is what allows any actor to have some kind of place in a scene. So because we created this blueprint asset as actor blueprint, we can drag it into the scene and place it in a level, right? So drag and drop your newly created blueprint actor, and you're gonna see that it actually has a place in a level. This is fantastic and proves that yes, we can create blueprints out of any object when only actors are placeable. You can verify this by creating a completely new blueprint and choosing, for example, an object, because as I said, you can create the blueprint of any type of object, and object is the type of object, of course. So select an object from all classes and now try to drag it onto the level, and you're suddenly gonna see the same, you cannot place object on a level because only actors are going to be able to be placed on the level. And lastly, what we are left with is the C++ class filter. So turn off the blueprint class filter and turn on the C++ class. And suddenly you're gonna see that again, we do not have C++ class type of asset available. Well, as you remember, we created blueprints project, and because of this, we do not have any C++ in this project whatsoever. We do not have our custom code associated with this project, but we can actually browse some C++ classes that are visible in the editor, which are parts of the engine. So the engine itself, of course, have a ton of hundreds and thousands of source code files, and we can actually browse engine content associated with this version of Unreal that you're using by checking the engine content folders. So as I said, in the folder all, you're gonna have content folder, which is basically your content associated with this project, but you can also have folders which are associated with some plugins or associated with the engine itself. As I said, the version of the engine that you're using. And to show this content, go into the content browser, settings, and in the content category, tick the show engine content. And as you can see, suddenly in the folder all, you're gonna have the engine folder, which gonna contain also a content folder. And I'm gonna explain to you why actually this is called the content folder also in the engine, the same as in your project. But inside there is going to be a ton of folders containing just a ton of different assets. And to show this, turn on some different filters like materials, static meshes, or textures while having the engine content being selected, and you're gonna see how many of different types of assets there are. So as I said, those are assets that are being used by engine to display things to you. So for example, when you're gonna open some kind of material editor, or you're gonna have like some kind of icons or some models that you can add to the scene. Just as you remember, we are able to add to the scene from the quickly add to the project button context menu. You can add basic shapes like cube and sphere. All those assets you're gonna find actually in this engine content. And what is really fun about this thing is not only that you get a ton of free assets that you can use, but also a ton of new materials and effects and things that you can learn from. And they are just perfect source of knowledge onto how to make some kind of materials that you're gonna often encounter, and many of them look very fun. So while having the material filter selected, try to look for the material called mirror plane material and drag and drop it on some static mesh actor on the scene, your floor, and this material looks kind of like old LCD grid mesh display, something like this, you know, kind of fun thing. Or the other one is laser pointer material. Drag and drop it on your floor and you're gonna see it looks like strange laser pointer effect. So browse those things, browse the engine content, and you can learn a lot from those materials on how they are being done. Also like textures, there's a lot of kind of cool textures that you can use, and static meshes that are sometimes basic, but sometimes you just need this basic thing. You cannot find it anywhere, but you can actually browse for static meshes in here and drag it to the scene. So that's fun. But one thing that I really suggest when you're using these assets, try not to modify them. And if you want to modify them because you, for example, need to use this thing, just copy them into your project's content folder. You can do so by simply selecting the asset, hitting Ctrl+C, going into your content folder, whichever folder you want to copy it into, and with shortcut Ctrl+V, just basically copy it into place, or drag the selected asset while holding Alt key, and suddenly you're gonna see that you can copy here the object and you're gonna make the copy. And this is because if you're gonna edit the engine material, stuff may break and it may actually not work correctly later on. But you know, if you're gonna copy the things, you have your unique copy of the asset and you're gonna be able to do whatever you like to do with the thing, right? Okay, fun. This is engine content, but you haven't still showed us a C++ classes. Okay, I'm getting done there. Back in the settings where you turned on the engine content, there is under the content category also option to show C++ classes. So when you're gonna click this in the engine folder, just under the content folder, there is going to be engine C++ classes. There is going to be a ton of folders down there, but if you're gonna turn on the C++ class filters, yeah, suddenly you're gonna see there are many C++ files that you can browse, but you won't gonna be able to edit them in Unreal. Remember, this is C++ code, and C++ code, as most codes are being written in some kind of IDE, right? Maybe Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, Rider, or any different code editing software that allows you to do so. In here, you can only browse the files itself, but you cannot peek into the file or edit the file. You use the coding IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, which in short is just the application that allows you to edit and compile some programming language source code. So you won't gonna really use this filter too much, so I suggest just to turn this off and hide the C++ classes. That was just fun to see this thing, but it's gonna obscure your view, and also it might pop up in the searches, so you go into the settings and actually turn off the show C++ classes. But I will leave the show engine content because, as I said, you can browse for assets that you can maybe reuse. Again, I suggest just to copy them, just to be sure that you won't gonna break anything for yourself in an engine. Copy them into your project content folder. We're gonna also show you a few other filters that might prove very useful, and you can very easily browse for them in the filters menu by basically just typing. Most panel lists or list panels that you can see are browsable by simply typing. Type modified just to see that there is actually other filters modified that you can select. This filter simply shows you all the assets that you've modified and are ready to be saved. So go into your all folder and you're gonna see all the assets that need to be saved before you're gonna be able to close Unreal safely without losing any progress in modifying them or losing them being created if you created a new asset. Every single new asset that you're gonna create gonna have to be saved before you're gonna be able to close safely Unreal. Otherwise, you're gonna lose the asset. It won't gonna be saved. It's just basically gonna be destroyed. You can hit the save all button and suddenly you're gonna get the pop-up to what things do you want to save. You can uncheck things from this list if you don't want to save them. And by hitting save selected, assets gonna be saved, and now you can safely close the editor. And lastly, about the content folder. So right click the content folder and choose show in Explorer. And what is gonna pop up is going to be a folder with this content contained in your project. Go into one directory up, which in my case it's a game. Remember, I saved my project into the game folder, and suddenly you're gonna see there is whole new project. So this is the location on the disk that you chose that your project is going to be saved. And I am going to explain in the next video what all those folders are, but you're gonna see that there is the content folder, and the content folder contains all the assets that are going to be contained in your project. Well, this is not all the assets, because as you remember, I've told you that you can have assets from the engine, and engine also has content folder as I've explained to you, but also you can have content from the plugins. In the next video, we're gonna explain what plugins are and where you can browse for the content from the plugins that you can add to your project. But remember that in your content folder, the files associated with your project specifically are going to be contained, and you can confirm this by going into the content folder and try to look for the same folders that you have actually in your project. So let's say go into the folder third person, and you're gonna find in folder maps there is the third person map.umap, and this is the map that we were editing in the first video. Third person map that did come with template, and all the assets that you're gonna find in your projects are going to be located in the content directory. As you can also see, there are some folders that you cannot find in the content directory browser in the Unreal editor, and this is because Unreal creates some folders that are hidden in editor but are going to be located in the content folder. So this is very important if you're later gonna play with source control to keep attention into what is in the content folder. Usually you do not want to touch stuff in the content folder from the file explorer, but edit the contents of the content folder with use of Unreal inside the editor. There are also a few very important asset types like data tables and enumerations and structures that we are going to explore in the next videos. In the next video, we're gonna import some new models, create some landscapes, play with materials and textures to make them look just nice. On top of this, we're gonna play with lighting and foliage and show you a new tool to handle lighting very easily on a new empty level. So remember to subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, join the Reddit r/UEFN, dedicated for UEFN Creative 2.0 and verse scripting language, and I see you in the next video.